it's like I said, I was living in misery those last 2 or 3 years of my clean time.
Yeah. What do you describe as? How would you describe misery?
Being in a room full of people who were just like you and not feeling a part of, feeling isolated, feeling alone. To me, that's the most miserable feeling, because, and I don't know if everyone struggles with this, but, I just want to be loved and accepted. But how can you love and accept someone that's such an asshole?
Well, welcome to the podcast, man.
Yeah, man.
It's
Thanks
good
for having me.
Hey, my pleasure. It's good having you on, man. It was funny. I called you last night, and you were like, "Yeah, but I'm picking up my 90 days tomorrow."
Yeah.
I was like, "That is awesome, man. Congratulations."
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. It feels really good.
Does it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Which we'll get into your story some, but I know this is you coming back after having multiple years clean. So how does that like feel? Before we get into the story, I was asked.
Man, having 8 years that I had, man, I was white knuckling a lot of that, and there towards the end, I was just really miserable, and slowly taking a lot of things back in my life, not really letting God's will take place as it should have been, and eventually I failed. It feels good to be back now, but it's very humbling. I created a lot of chaos, a lot of destruction. Naturally, it's what it took to get me back, and so the first 30 days was really hard, very, very hard. It was very different this time coming back, man. I just couldn't really grasp it as well. I was fighting, wanting to go back out, fighting my inner demons, wanting to stay. And I had to have some outside help. It wasn't just getting into the rooms of Narcotics Anonymous that was really going to make it happen. I had to check myself into a mental institution and completely give up any power that I felt like I had. It just wasn't working for me. So
did that, like, I hear people say that it's kind of like you have that like thought of it being like, I had this amount of time, and then it's like, I'll fucking never get there again. Is there like that mental block in your...
Man, yeah. So, and it didn't just take one time walking back in like, hey, man, I'm going to do this again. It took several tries of trying, well, several tries. I was talking to a really close friend of mine that's got an umpteenth number of years, and he convinced me to come to a meeting, and I remember coming to that meeting, I was so angry, and I don't even know why, like nobody did me any wrong. I think I was just angry because I was back here again, and all that guilt, shame, and remorse was just, man, kicking my ass. And so yeah, man, I think it took about 4 tries to come back in. I was out there for about 5 years after having 8 years clean. And I think for me anyways, having all that time trying to come back, there was a real ego struggle, like, don't you know who the fuck I am kind of thing. But I was telling myself that, I was really, it was really an internal battle, and so, yeah, man, it took what it took, but unfortunately it took me having to destroy a lot of things. My former employer terminated and banned from the property, separated from my wife about 3 months now. I lost a lot of things that were very meaningful, not the job, but the fact that I did lose it in the way that I did lose it was, it's definitely something to be said.
Yeah. The and I have to say that, like, I told you already, I appreciate you coming on, but this is a little bit new. I think our first guest, Ian, had like 90 days clean or something like that, which is by all means it's a lot of time. When you're struggling to get one day and then you rack up 90 days, that's an absolute miracle. But I think it's such an interesting perspective as well, because where you're at now is much more relatable and identifiable to the newcomer than opposed to somebody with 15, 20, 30 plus years, like people that we've had on this podcast, you know?
Yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, I remember when I first came in, I was 20 years old, and guys having like 30 years plus, and I'm like, man, these guys are gods of like, like gods of the recovery program kind of thing. But, it's taught to me early on that if you want what we have, just, do what we do. Stick with the winners, people who have time, who are working a program. And so that's what I did. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was fresh out of jail at 20 years old. And that's what stopped me, at 18. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, man, I had picked up a few years after that, and it was a pretty good life, but, I didn't want to, I guess, keep that humility, in a way. I still had a lot of crazy in me, and I tried it again. Basically, I put a lot of things in front of my recovery and lost it, which, is something that is taught that whatever you put in front of your recovery, you're going to lose. And I was that one to touch the burner, so to speak, a few times. It wasn't just the first time, ow, that hurts. Now, well, the back of the hand isn't burnt yet, so let's try that too. Absolute insanity, man.
Yeah. I think there's something in your story, your experience, I don't think is well, I know it's not unique, but it's not unique to members with time either, because even like I have 15 years clean, and I have experienced times in my recovery to where what happens, or at least in my experience, what happens is I, start putting, like you said, other things in front of my recovery, and certain things become more important. And then I just become less attracted to like going to these 12-step meetings, like I'm not excited about my recovery, know, and so what happens is I start practicing like bad behaviors, or especially when you stay clean, the longer you stay clean, the narrower the path they talk about, right? So if I start doing things that like I'm not proud of in my life, like those things lead to bad feelings, and then bad feelings, like I haven't got to the point where it's like it's decision time to like want to use, but like I've gotten to places in my recovery I was like, man, this sucks, dude, this sucks, and it isn't until I reinvest into my recovery and start doing those simple basic things, which still sucks in the beginning, and then it start to feel better over time, kind of, so I say all that to say that like I don't think that like your experiences are probably much different than a lot of people's, right. Except that you, like many others, made a decision to go use during that time, which I can only imagine adds that much more of a level of guilt and shame.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I always had a big reservation, man, when I was going through my 8 years, that if my mother ever died, that's what would take me back out. My mom was my best friend, the only parent I had my entire life. But I took my own will and decided to use before she passed away. And that was a couple of years before she passed that I started using. And so, yeah, man. I think that things happen for a purpose. So, I can't honestly say where I think that I'd be if I was still clean, and there towards the end of my clean time, I was just so damn miserable. I stopped really going to meetings, stopped doing step work, man. I can tell you there were so many times where I felt so spiritually bankrupt, like I would get to a certain point of happiness and then there was just nothing. It was almost like a void, And that was the direct result of not working steps. I worked all the way up to step 8 in 8 years. And that just doesn't make any sense.
Step a year.
Yeah, right. I don't know about that. It was, I was really grateful that I finally worked past the 4-step and, that I really got to know myself a little bit better. But when it came to making an amends, I really struggled with looking at myself at an even deeper level, like how many people have I hurt? I just wanted to run, and that's what I did. So, yeah, man.
Well, it's good to have you back. That kind of brings you up. You brought up your mother, so I guess we'll start from the beginning. What was that? What was your childhood like growing up?
Man, sorry.
Right. You're okay.
Mic.
Yeah, no, it's okay.
My childhood growing up was actually pretty good. I'm the youngest of 4 siblings, and I didn't really have like a super rough childhood. We always had a house kind of thing. And I remember growing up, man, like I always felt like I was a little bit different, I started self-harming when I was 7 years old.
How?
I would literally peel the skin on the bottom of my feet until I bled. And I did it so much that my grandmother had to wrap my feet. It was a crazy thing. It wasn't like if I were to have known about taking a knife to myself, I probably would have done it, just out of pure curiosity. And I didn't know why for the longest time I did that, to try to inflict that pain. But at 4 years old, I was sexually molested. And those repressed memories, I think, were coming back, and I was acting them out in different ways. So yeah, man, that was pretty intense. And I didn't really self-harm after that, after I stopped living with her after a couple of years. I started using drugs at 11 years old. And, my mom, she did the best that she could for us, man. She was a really hard worker. She always maintained 2 or 3 jobs, made sure that we had, food on the table. And of course, the older siblings were acting as, the other significant other, if you will, staying at home, making all the meals, making sure us younger siblings had what we needed. And, so yeah, man, like, a lot of us had to learn from a very early age how to take care of ourselves, and we really relied on one another, and that's not to say anything bad about my mom. She did an excellent job, in my opinion, to have 4 kids, to take care of them, to still provide. We didn't go without for the most part, and yeah, man, I would say my life really hit a more chaotic turn when I hit 13. Is when I discovered cocaine.
I want to step back, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Talking about the sexual abuse.
Sure.
And if you're not comfortable, that's totally fine. If you're not comfortable talking.
I brought it up, so
yeah.
So it's
that's
all
true.
good,
You did. But yeah. So what age did you say that was?
It was 4, either 5 years old, something like that.
4 or 5 years old, because that's just the time you start kind of like, I think, developing memories. Yeah.
Right.
But what type of? I know it's confused at that age. It would be more confusing than anything. Of like, but what type of feelings do you think that you harbored from that experience?
Really delving very deep into it with a therapist, psychologist, is the feelings that I pulled away from it were that I was being taken advantage of, that there was nobody really there. I didn't really know what it was, obviously, at 4 or 5 years old. I was such an innocent child. There's no way to have known that, and I didn't realize it until later in life when those memories came back up. And it came back up in a way of like, hey, you remember this? And now I know what it is. So it just kind of hit me like a ton of bricks, But yeah, feeling like I was abandoned a little bit, that I couldn't really talk to anybody. When they did come up, it was like, do I say anything now? You know, this is like 10 years ago, 20 years ago, whatever. So I think a lot of those experiences are what helped me to use, you know, not feeling like I could talk to somebody about it. So, and it came out in ways of like anger, frustration, fear. Fear was really the primary one, you know. Fear of not being loved, you know. And then that also affected like my personal relationships, you know what I mean? Like I really didn't want to be around very many people. I isolated a lot when I was a kid. So
yeah. You said that those thoughts and memories came up later in life. So was it something that you kind of like walled off, blocked off from your memory, or?
You know, I wish I could tell you, you know, that it was just something that I made a conscious decision not to think about. I think that was psychologically my mind's way of protecting me, you know. And then when it was time, you know, it was just going to come back up. Like, hey, you remember this? What the fuck, brain? What the hell? You know, I know I don't want to remember this. What are you doing to me right now? You know, yeah. Like getting forced into a tornado kind of thing, you know, and but I had some years clean, so thankfully it wasn't as intense. Like I could only imagine if I was using how much further that would keep me down, you know, because I wouldn't really, I would just use that as another excuse to keep going. You know, well, I was sexually abused, you know, and this is what I'm going to do now because, you know, I'm a victim, you know, poor woe is me mentality, which is easy to adapt with anything, especially for an addict. So yeah, man. But to kind of touch back on the life story, you know, my mom, she she was very strong-willed, man. You know, she did a lot of things independently, and that wore off on all of us kids. You know, all of my brothers and sisters are very hardworking and have always had a great work ethic and have always been successful in whatever they do. And that also speaks the same for me, you know, I mean, but as an addict, you know, anything that I have is an asset. If I don't work on my recovery program, can be used as a defect very quickly. And of course, you know, it just kind of goes back to the, you know, if I don't do the next right thing for my recovery, if I'm not putting my recovery first, if I'm not using that willpower appropriately, then I'm gonna fail, and I did. But chasing success is something that I love to do. You know, I love to be successful. I love to use all of the energies and strengths that I have to try to be successful in life. And unfortunately, if I don't put myself in check, then I lose everything. You know, my first stint of clean time after jail was 5 years, and then I took it all back, and I was out for 3 years. And then my last stint of clean time was 8 years, and I can honestly say the last 4 years of that clean time, I was white knuckling it, man. I was white knuckling it like hard. And I suffered because of that. There's a lot of misery, man. Being like that hard ass in the meetings and, oh, you know what you got to do, you know, just hunker down, you know, just being that guy, you know, like adapting a certain like hard ass mentality for no reason, you know, just because I could. And, it was very egotistical, and I paid for it. So pushed a lot of people away.
Yeah. So you said when you were 13 is when you started using heavily?
Yeah. I discovered weed. My stepdad was actually a dealer. And I remember the first time I smoked, man, it was pretty incredible, actually. I didn't really pick up the habit like right away. It was a few months later as I started to like get to know the kids that were doing it. And then I was like, okay, we're just going to keep down this road because this feels good. It's great escape too. And
So your first time using was enjoyable.
Yeah.
Mine, because mine wasn't. People say that a lot. Mine was the first time I smoked weed when I was like 12 years old. I just felt I couldn't close my eyes because every time I closed my eyes, I felt like I was falling. You know, like a dizzy feeling.
Oh,
You know.
yeah.
Of course, the addict in me didn't stop me from trying it again.
Well,
but
me at 11 years old, I was just hitting puberty, and I was trying to impress this girl. And you know, I knew that my parents like sold weed, so like fuck it. That was the enjoyable part for me, is that I was showing off, you know, like look at me. It was
yeah. So you started out like most people with the gateway drug of marijuana.
Yeah. Don't say gateway with marijuana. Ooh.
Tends to be the first one that people try, though.
Yeah, man. Yep, it is. And so yeah, eventually I found my way back to some old friends that I had known for a very long time when I was a lot younger, and catching back up with them while they were doing cocaine. And their mother actually sold it. And yeah, man, that started the spiral, the beginning of the end. But before that end came, from 13 all the way to 18, it's 5 years of absolute chaos, man. I remember the first time I did cocaine, I fucking hated it. I had my knees to my chest, felt like my heart was going to explode, and the guy I was doing it with, he's like, man, it's okay, you know, it's okay, it's going to pass. And I remember that obsessive feeling after that, I want more. Like, I had more of this stuff, man. Because it wasn't all bad, you know, I felt invincible, man. 10 foot tall, made of steel, could walk through fire, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You just can't touch me. And it's pretty chaotic, man. It wasn't long after that where I was going on runs with their mother, and like picking up and selling and pistol under the seat, you know, kind of thing. Just stupid, man. I was a child. Even more disturbing is how, you know, my friend's mother was just like okay with all of this. You know, I didn't think about it then because I was accepted again. So I felt like I was a part of, no matter how chaotic it was, obviously, but I was a part of. And so I was like, cool, man, I'm going to keep doing this. Man, if I can go back to my younger self, I'd probably beat the shit out of myself. Like, what are you doing, man?
Yeah. No, as you definitely like look back, and because I look back at the same experiences of like, you know, friends' parents, you know, dealing, and then just like being all in that environment, and it really makes me think about like, you know, that whole being a product of your environment thing, because I could not imagine like my daughter growing up around that, like as a normal person now, you know what I mean? Like what type of parent are you to like, you know, put your kids in that environment? But if you don't know any different, like if they grow up that way and then you know, and you grow up that way, it's just like, you don't really know that there's like, you know that there's something different, but not for people like you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Kind of, or at least that's the way I did when I was younger. So,
well, and I think, you know, like really looking into it now that I'm 37 years old, like, I feel like I'm a lot more mature, obviously. I don't have kids, but I have nieces and nephews, and, you know, to me, they're like my kids. I couldn't imagine life being so hard where I would put somebody through that. Kids above all, you know what I mean? To give them an environment of absolute toxicity, where they don't have a choice but to fall in, you know? I just couldn't imagine that.
Yeah.
And, you know, growing up, like I always told myself, man, if I do have kids, I would do my very best to never put them in that environment, you know? Like I would rather, it just, I just can't fathom it, man. You know, it just doesn't make any sense, man. And for somebody to have done that to their kids, it's pretty heartbreaking.
Yeah.
You know.
So you're doing these runs. You feel like you're fully fully addicted now to cocaine?
Oh yeah, man.
Do you even identify like an addiction at that point, or you just?
I had no idea what addiction was.
Yeah,
I had no idea. I had no idea even when I smoked pot the first time. I didn't know what addiction was, man. You know, and I had no idea what it was until a few members of Narcotics Anonymous brought in a meeting in the jail that I had already been sentenced to. I had no idea about even being helped, you know, and what that was.
And what was you in jail for, or how long was you in jail for?
Well, I went to jail for burglary to an unoccupied dwelling.
And what age?
18 years old.
18 years old.
I spent 9 months in county jail trying to fight not going to prison for 25 years. I had 7 felonies, multiple misdemeanors. Every pill that I had on me was a felony.
Yeah.
Of course, you know, running and gunning, you had no idea what the hell you were doing. But
so what was, to back it up a little bit, what took place that happened that sent you to jail?
Well, I'd been up on like a 3-day bender, and like that last night there was a huge party, and somebody dropped some Xanax on the floor, and so I took that Xanax. I ran out of coke at like maybe 6 a.m., you know, and the bodega sold me beer. I had big old, you know, goatee and all that stuff at that age. And so my co-defendant walked back to my house with me. I picked up a 6-pack of Tall Boys. I had just a little bit of weed and a pocket full of Xanax. And got back to the house, drank all the beer, popped all the Xannies, and I said to myself, you know, my neighbor's got a QP in her freezer. And I lived in a duplex at the time.
What's a quarter QP? Just for the people.
So a QP is a quarter pound of marijuana. And so I had this bright idea because I had ran out of drugs that, you know, I'd just crawl into her back window and get the QP and be good. Well, it didn't stop there. I was showing off. I opened up the front door and let my co-defendant in, and I don't remember much past that. I passed out. All the Xanax hit me, all the beer, and I woke up on the 6th floor of county jail, laying on a metal bench, somebody yelling at me through a fucking wall speaker, and I'm tripping, dude, because at this point it was like, where the fuck am I at? I had a big old raspberry on my knee. I didn't know how I got that. And what I will always call a welcome to hell packet, you know, with like a toothbrush, like the little rules and regulations that you have to follow when you're in jail. And from that point on, that was my experience getting clean and dealing with reality. It's a very harsh experience.
Yeah. Do you remember when you actually like came to the drugs wore off? Do you remember what the thought process was like?
What do you mean? Like,
there's shame and guilt, or
no
remorse or anger?
No, I wasn't. I was more or
problem.
I was more or less confused. You know, like, how did I end up here? Like, I knew that I had broken into this lady's house. I'm like, okay, well, that's what happened. That's why I'm in jail. So yeah, man, I just had to go to my first appearance, and I asked him to let me out. I said no. You know, said, you ain't getting out for a little while. And I was like, well, shit. And so I went to my first court date, and my first court date had nothing to do with my burglary. Apparently, when I got into jail, I asked the CO, corrections officer, for my cigarettes. He told me, no, there's no smoking in the jail. I proceeded to kick the telephone off the wall. And accrued. Yeah, dude, it was pretty bad.
Xanax are like gotta be one of the top leaders in sending people in the jail.
Man. And you know what's crazy, man, is that I had some experiences before that with Xanax blacking out while I was in the midst of my using. It didn't stop me, man, you know. My first experience with blacking out with that stuff was I had taken some. I had been up for like a day and a half, almost 2 days, and my buddy's older brother was going up to the store, I was out of it, dude. I walked into the store and there was a case of Budweiser right there, and I see him kind of creeping around the gas station. I just clicked in my head, man, this is perfect. A little beer run. So I grab a fucking case of Budweiser and I run out to the car, and my buddy's little brother's in the back seat. He sees me running up with this case of beer, and he kicks the door open. I toss the beer, and I get 1 foot into the car, and I put my arm on the oh shit handle, or I grab the oh shit handle, and he fucking stomps the gas, and I come out of the car, dude. My friggin' head hits the floor, dude, and I remember I stopped rolling. I was looking at the gas station. Ladies coming out, hey, you didn't pay for that beer. And I'm getting up. I was like, no fucking shit, you know. I had a New York Yankees hat on. It was still in the parking lot the next day. It was, so that was my first experience with it, man. And they told me some wild shit that I did that I don't remember. Like, we went to another gas station because obviously they couldn't go back to that one. And like, I walked in, I was like knocking over the dude's chip rack and like just making all this ruckus. The guy was in my face yelling at. I don't remember any of this.
Yeah,
man, you know what I mean. It's like, but
you never do,
right?
When you're on
Right,
accent,
man. But it's crazy, man, to think like those minor things that I did while I was blacked out. I couldn't imagine if I were to have had access to like a firearm or something, you know what I mean? Like, really threw my life away. But essentially, kind of fast forwarding to when I was an adult, at 18, going to jail, I did throw my life away. I had to plea out to the major felony. And, you know, I had always wanted to go into the military, and I couldn't do that anymore. So I basically kissed my life goodbye. Everything that I wanted to do. Which I know for some people, military life, man, that's, you know, it's crazy. You know, that's what you want to do with your life. Well, I was pretty smart, but I felt like there was a lot of honor in going into the military, and I wanted to do that. But such is life, man. The decisions we make, you know, you have to live with those consequences. So,
yeah. So that's where you heard your first 12-step message was in the jail?
Yeah. Yeah, when I heard that message and they were talking about addiction, and it's like they were just telling my story, man. You know, the way that I was feeling, the desperate feeling, the hopelessness, all of that. And, you know, when I asked the judge for help, you know, my older brother kind of disagreed with it, and he thought I was copping out. And I guess you could say in a way I kind of was, because 25 years in prison or a year sentence, you know, who's not going to take the year, you know? And at 18, I'll never forget, man, like these guys, black suits, I'm in the courthouse, there's nobody around me, I'm by myself, and they hand me this docket that says 21 months to 25 years. And they said the judge is pushing for 25 years, or the prosecutor is pushing for 25 years. And I just felt my life just drain out of my body, man. I felt like, damn, I just threw my life away, you know? And so it was enough of a desperate situation for me to ask for help, you know? It's like, dude, I don't want to go to who the fuck wants to go to prison for any amount of time? You know what I mean? But 25 years especially, I thought of my life 25 years later, you know, really threw my life away kind of thing. So I got 4 months of incarcerated treatment, Matrix House program, and I finished out my sentence with work furlough, working for Habitat for Humanity at Jacksonville. And I had a job before I got out, and I stayed with Habitat for about 5 years. And that was... It's a really good experience, man, coming out of jail, working for such a great organization that gives back to the community. You know, I kind of felt like I was making up for a lot of the wrong I did by giving back, you know, getting paid too, but you know, you know, there's a lot of good stuff with it too. So, yeah.
And you had so you started learning those trades in there, like construction trades? Yeah.
Carpentry, framing, I got on with him as a framer, and I did that. I was framing houses. It was a lot of fun, man. I fell in love with carpentry then. It was a great hobby, something I always wanted to do. So
nice. So you're working at this time, or you go into meetings?
Yeah. So when I got out, I had to do the 3 meetings a week, get my paper signed. I was that guy walking into the meeting. But I had 2 years of probation with early termination upon completion, which was restitution, like doing all the meetings and stuff like that. And I did about 9 months worth of my probation, and I got it early terminated. So I had paid off all my restitution within 6 months. And I went before the judge and I said, hey, I'm doing all these great things I already completed, and he early termed it. So it didn't stop me from going to meetings after that. Like, I knew, hey man, this is the life that you have now. You need to, treat this incurable disease that you have. And at that point, I didn't really give it the respect that it deserved, Like, I was like, fucking disease. I don't have a fucking disease. You know what I mean? I just have a problem. I have a social problem. I have a me problem. It's definitely not some kind of disease that I have in between my ears, I was young and didn't really, I'm not going to say I didn't understand it, but I didn't want to accept it, Especially when I heard that alcohol is a drug, I'm like, what? No, it's not. It's just as debilitating as any other mind-altering, mood-altering substance, fan. You know?
Well, it literally says on the can, this drug may cause. So it's definitely a drug.
Right.
A lot of people just don't think that, they have a problem with it. Typically because they skip right past it,
Yeah. Which is crazy because I always go straight to it the first thing. Yeah. Because it's the easiest, You go to a store, you get what you want, come home. And so after relapsing, kind of fast forwarding a little bit, after these 8 years, that's what I was really heavily into, was drinking. And I would drink every day, man. I'd get home, I'd drink, between a 6 and a 12 pack. And then medical marijuana was really coming out big. I was like, it's medical.
Well, yeah, I mean, I would definitely want to get there. Talking about that, like, whole process of, like, relapse, and once you have, like, a significant amount of experience and a recovery process. But to go back a little bit, you stayed around for 2 years before the first time you relapsed?
Yeah, so I stayed around for 2 years, and it was a really eye-opening experience, like, really just dealing with social factors, right? Because I isolated most of my childhood. I just never really felt like I was a part of. Anytime I try, I was a really sensitive kid. So trying to stay in a program where you have to socialize, was a very, very hard thing for me. And typically how I would act out if I felt like I wasn't, being respected, or I just didn't want to be there, was in fear. And that fear came out in anger, frustration, which typically pushes people away. And I was like, well, there's my tool. I'm going to use this tool. And I'll never forget, man, one of my first meetings out of jail, and I had threatened everybody in the meeting. It was a candlelight meeting. The meeting was packed, man. There's probably like 50 people in this meeting, and I got so angry. I didn't plan to share this way, but I got so fucking angry, man. I was like, you know what? Fuck you. Fuck everybody. Step outside if you want some, like, I'm just this big Billy badass, probably a $110 soaking wet, like, still skinny as hell, fresh out of jail, and never forget, man, my first sponsor walked out, big old dude from Boston, and he's like 60 years old now, but back then, and he's a tall guy, he's like 2 foot tall, or not 2 foot, but he's like 2 or 3 inches taller than me, and I'm 6'2". And I remember when he stepped outside, I'm like, shit, how am I going to do this? Because there's no way. And he comes walking up to me, and I'm cussing at him, everything. He just gives me the biggest hug. And I remember breaking down in that grown man's hand, in his arms, and he says, man, it's going to be okay, brother. I love you. You don't have to do this alone, man. We're going to get through this. And right then was the first example of unconditional love in that, in the rooms of Narcotics Anonymous. And I'm very grateful for that individual who is still my sponsor today. So, but, you know, in spite of all the good things and all the good relationships that I was slowly building, it didn't really matter. You know, I started hanging out with people who weren't in the rooms. And like I said, I struggled with the fact that alcohol is a drug. And so, you know, they were always going out drinking, you know, the AmeriCorps program people. And, yeah, man, I picked up my first beer and off to the races.
And how much time did you say you had clean then?
I had 5 years because I claimed all my time clean from when I was locked up, as I was told to.
So how long was you out of jail? Or on your own going to meetings and stuff with that 5 years?
Close to 3 years at that point.
3 years.
Yeah.
So you made a conscious decision then. It's like you knew by that time that I shouldn't do this. Yeah.
And I mean, you know, maybe you could chalk it up to just being arrogant, you know, young. It's like, there's no way, man. There's no way I'm an addict. You know what I'm saying? Like, I just got out of jail. Like, and I say just, you know, but after all the struggle and all the pain I went through, you would think, you know, there's no way that I'm going to pick up again. But things got good. Things got very comfortable. And I started to lose that focus of the pain, playing the tape through, like what we like to call it, you know, of all the pain that you had to go through before you finally realize that, hey, this isn't what I'm supposed to be doing, and never do it again. I kind of took that tape and stored it away somewhere, forgot what the hell it was, because I was off to the races again.
Yeah.
Thankfully, didn't pick cocaine back up. That was a relationship that jail ended for me, gratefully enough.
Yeah.
Especially nowadays, man, I couldn't imagine trying to use now, dude, and probably die the first hit and all the crap that's on the streets now, you know?
Yeah.
But not that I would want to, but just, I just couldn't imagine it, man.
Yeah. So you were using for how long before you decided to come back? That time.
So it was probably about 3 years, maybe 2 or 3 years. Yeah, I remember I was 25 when I came back. I was 26 when I met my wife. So I had just over a year clean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what was that process like that led you back to the rooms the first time?
I lost my job. Lost my job. My fiance at the time, she's from California, and we made the decision together to for her to move back to California because we worked at the same place. And so we got her all packed up and she moved back, and the plan was for me to follow, and I didn't. I stayed here, kept using. Yeah, I was supposed to get a job, you know, all that stuff, because I didn't have a job at the time, and was supposed to save up and then eventually meet her up, and I just never did. So, losing everything. So, like, really making the decision to not follow her there, you know, based on the pain, you know, it's just kind of like letting go of a responsibility because I was really afraid of commitment, really is what it was. And I didn't want to commit to move to a whole nother state, let alone across the country, literally, for anyone at the time. I was so damn selfish. Just wanted to do what I wanted to do. And so, yeah, man. What brought me back in was losing everything again. You know, the job, the wife, my truck. I was sleeping in my truck at the time, bouncing from couch to couch, and finally ended up on my oldest brother's best friend's couch. Kind of like assumed my way onto the couch because my mom was living there. and she told me to come and stay there. And so he had no problem with it. But I always look back at that as like, damn, I didn't really ask the guy. I just kind of showed up one day and stayed. And so, yeah, I eventually lost that truck because I had no idea about more complex mechanics and tried to fix a blown head gasket myself and ended up messing it up. So I had to sell the truck. And yeah, man, that was the beginning of the end. I had no money. I didn't have my own place. I was basically like loafing. And my brother-in-law at the time, he did a lot of store resets. And you know, he was doing a Family Dollar store reset, and he was talking to the manager. I said, "Hey, man, if you need help, I got a guy." You know, he was talking about me. And so he called me up one morning and said, "Hey, man, get on your best clothes. I'm going to give you a job interview. I'm going to take you to this guy." And I was living off of Cassett, right? And this job was off of Lim Turner with no car. So I'm like, you know, it didn't really stop me, man, because I was so desperate to get off of my ass and back on my feet. You know, like finally it hit me. You know what I mean? Where I stopped feeling bad for myself, and I knew that I had to do something different. And so I landed this job, and it was a cashier position, making $8.25 an hour. And so now that I have this job, the problem is getting to this job. Well, thank God for Jacksonville transportation. And I had actually bought a GoPed while I was working at Habitat that I still had, a little 25cc GoPed. Well, the buses wouldn't run back to the main terminal from Lim Turner. Or, I'm sorry, they wouldn't run from the main terminal back to Cassett. So I could catch a bus back from work to the main terminal, but I had to figure it out to get home. So I would ride my GoPed to the main terminal, lock it up, and then get off of work. And at like midnight, you know, buses run so slow, I'd ride my GoPed back from the main terminal all the way to Cassett, like 6 or 7 miles away. And so yeah, man, like I had that gift of desperation that we talk about, you know, like I just really wanted to succeed. You know, I really wanted to rebuild my life no matter what it took. You know, the lack of transportation as far as having a vehicle didn't stop me. You know, I had other ways and means. I just needed to have the willingness, and I was starting to slowly regain that. And then all of a sudden it was like a floodgate. Like, all right, we can do this, you just need to do this and that, you know. Started to build these checklists of positivity, and yeah, so I got myself back into the rooms, man. And then when I was trying to go to meetings and I couldn't find a ride, I'd ride that little GoPed, man, 25cc, coming down the road like a weed eater. There's a couple members that still joke about that, calling me Moped Marty, which is it's funny.
So you start getting back involved into the meetings this time. I think we touched on a lot. You know, you got 8 years clean, which I'm sure wasn't all bad. It was just like you said, it started getting closer towards the end. And what did you say that kind of led you into that second relapse?
Essentially not doing step work. Not actually working on the reasons why I use the character defects of, I didn't want to face my fears. As tough as I was acting, it was really more or less I was just afraid, and I was running from myself. I was running from the pain for a very long time, and eventually it caught up with me, where it was, well, the pain's great enough now. You know, we stacked all these things against you, and, you know, now we're going to try you. And I failed horribly. It's like I said, I was living in misery those last 2 or 3 years of my clean time.
Yeah. What do you describe as, how would you describe misery?
Being in a room full of people who were just like you and not feeling a part of, feeling isolated, feeling alone. To me, that's the most miserable feeling, you know, and I don't know if everyone struggles with this, but, you know, I just want to be loved and accepted. But how can you love and accept someone that's such an asshole? You know what I mean? That doesn't really know how to talk to people, you know, and And yeah, man, kind of to touch back on it, man, I always, like, at some point I would get this feeling of there's just nothing there. It was almost like
a void.
Yeah, a void,
Mm-hmm.
like a depression, and I couldn't express that to anyone. I feel like I couldn't really say it to anyone, because this is a void that I created,
Mm-hmm.
and I was still stuck in like self will. Okay, well, you created this void, now crawl yourself back out of it. It's very immature. You know what I mean? Like trying to do things on my own instead of using the program that was just so simple. All I had to do was do it.
Yeah.
Um,
I would tell you my experience with that void, and I try not to interject too much because I want to hear from your story. I'm sure most other people do. But I found that, like, what fills the void for me is being of service to other people.
yeah.
It is literally, I learned that early on was like, it was simple stuff like maybe giving somebody that was homeless a couple dollars because I had extra. I didn't have a lot, or buying somebody coffee, like things that my sponsor had told me early on to do, because it said when you do good, you feel good, and kind of like you was expressing earlier when you was talking about working in the Habitat for Humanity. Even though you was like it was a job, it gave you a sense of purpose.
Yeah.
And that's what I found at like being of service to others, which is unlimited when you go to a 12-step meeting, or at least in our area it is like there's so much that you can do that is service related, where there's nothing really to gain other than like helping others. And I found that is the like secret sauce to like filling that void in my world.
Yeah.
So,
and you're absolutely correct. I mean, I found that this time around, actually doing service for the right reasons, not to just fill my ego, but to fill a sense of self-worth by being selfless.
mm-hmm.
And it's very humbling, man. It really is. Like I feel like I'm a lot more mature within these 90 days than I was with the 8 years that I had. And I'm just going to chalk that up to some pretty horrible experiences that got me here,
Mm-hmm.
But it's something that we say, man, it just takes what it takes, and some people unfortunately don't survive that. And I'm so grateful that I did.
Yeah.
So grateful that I made it back, because a lot of people haven't. So
that is true. A lot of people don't ever make it to the room. So
yeah.
So to make it back a couple different times, and have that hopefully a jarring experience to bring about a more vigorous application of recovery, right?
Yeah.
To help change some things. And it's just unlearning, because like a lot of things, for instance, like the filling the void, the like being of service to other people. When I was in active addiction, and even for a long time afterwards, that like self-centeredness, that like that was kind of like I operated my whole life that way. It was always like, in order to have, I need to take, in order to achieve, like work hard and do all this. And you just learn through like just following instructions, right? For me, it was just follow. It wasn't like I figured it out. I followed instruction. I was like, oh shit, this works. I feel way better. I go to a meeting and I speak, at a treatment center or something. And I'm like, wow, I feel like I'm on cloud 9. What is this? and it's literally just being of service, doing something for somebody else, man.
Yeah.
But I want to say that, like, I am incredibly proud of you, and that's not like,
thank you, man.
My pleasure. Yeah, it's not saying something to just like make you feel good to be saying. I mean, we have a long history. I've known you for a long time. I sponsored you at a point in time, and to see you here, I have the empathy aspect of like the way my mind works is like visualizing myself as coming back after having multiple years clean, with 90 days clean or less, right? The 30 days, the 60 days, all those marks, and like I think about like how would my disease talk to me in those time frames, and it would be, for me, it would be like my disease trying to create a lot of doubt in my life.
Yeah.
And shame and stuff like that that my disease would try to have me focusing on. And I could say that, like, it's somebody who cares about you and wants to see you succeed is like, look at yourself through a different lens than your own.
Yeah,
you know, like
absolutely.
me, I use my grandmother or my wife or my daughter, people that I know that like love me unconditionally.
Yeah.
How would they feel if I had 90 days clean? They would be excited. They wouldn't be like, well, you had 8 years, loser. You know what I mean? That's how my
Right.
disease would talk
Right,
to me.
exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
But my family wouldn't.
Yeah.
They would be ecstatic, you know,
Yeah.
that I was there. And I am ecstatic for you. I really
Thank you,
am,
man.
man.
I really
And,
appreciate it.
you know, so much so that, you know, I guess we'll wrap it up soon so we can go get to your 90-day.
I'm gonna pick up that 90-day key tag.
You pick up that 90-day key tag, man.
Yeah, man.
And that's a miracle.
It
So
is.
thank you for coming on and sharing your experience.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. It was an awesome time.
Yeah, man.
All right, buddy.